Japanese names in modern times usually consist of a family name, followed by a given name. More than one given name is not generally used. Japanese names are usually written in kanji, which are characters usually Chinese in origin but Japanese in pronunciation. The kanji for a name may have a variety of possible Japanese pronunciations, but parents might use hiragana or katakana when giving a birth name to the newborn child. Names written in hiragana or katakana are phonetic renderings, and so lack the visual meaning of names expressed in the logographic kanji. Japanese family names are extremely varied. According to estimates, there are over 100,000 different surnames in use today in Japan. The three most common family names in Japan are Sato, Suzuki, and Takahashi. This diversity is in stark contrast to the situation in other nations of the East Asian cultural sphere, which reflects a different history. While Chinese surnames have been in use for millennia and were often reflective of an entire clan or adopted from nobles and were thence transferred to Korea and Vietnam via noble names, the vast majority of modern Japanese family names date only to the 19th century, following the Meiji Restoration, and were chosen at will. The recent introduction of surnames has two additional effects. Japanese names became widespread when the country had a very large population instead of dating to ancient times, and since little time has passed, Japanese names have not experienced as significant a surname extinction as has occurred in the much longer history in China. Surnames occur with varying frequency in different regions. For example, the names Chinin, Higa, and Shimabukuro are common in Okinawa but not in other parts of Japan. This is mainly due to differences between the language and culture of Yamato people and Okinawans. Many Japanese family names derive from features of the rural landscape. For example, Ishikawa means stone river, Yamamoto means the base of the mountain, and Inoue means above the well. While family names follow relatively consistent rules, given names are much more diverse in pronunciation and character usage. While many common names can easily be spelled or pronounced, many parents choose names with unusual characters or pronunciations, and such names cannot in general be spelled or pronounced unless both the spelling and pronunciation are given. Unusual pronunciations have especially become common, with this trend having increased significantly since the 1990s. For example, the popular boy's name is traditionally pronounced Hiroto, but in recent years alternative pronunciations Hiruto, Yamato, Taiga, Sora, Tato, Daito, and Misato have all entered use. Male names often end in ro or ta, or contain ichi, kazu, ji, or I, while female names often end in ko or mi. Other popular endings for female names include ka and na. Structure. The majority of Japanese people have one surname and one given name with no middle name, except for the Japanese imperial family, whose members bear no surname. The family name, Myoji, Yuji, or Sei, precedes the given name, called the name or lower name. The given name may be referred to as the lower name because, in vertically written Japanese, the given name appears under the family name. People with mixed Japanese and foreign parentage may have middle names. Historically, Myoji, Yuji and Sei had different meanings. Sei was originally the patrilineal surname, which is why up till now it has only granted only by the emperor as a title of male rank. The lower form of the name, Sei, being Tei, which is a common name in Japanese men. Although there was a male ancestor in ancient Japan who the name Sei originally came from, There were relatively few sei, and most of the medieval noble clans traced their lineage either directly to these sei to the courtiers of these sei. Yuji was another name used to designate patrilineal descent, but later merged with Myoji around the same time. Myoji was simply what a family chooses to call itself, as opposed to the sei granted by the emperor, while it was passed on patrilineally in male ancestors, including in male ancestors called haku. One had a certain degree of freedom in changing one's myoji. See also kabane. Multiple Japanese characters have the same pronunciations, so several Japanese names have multiple meanings. A particular kanji itself can have multiple meanings and pronunciations. In some names, Japanese characters phonetically spell a name and have no intended meaning behind them. Many Japanese personal names use puns. Very few names can serve either as surnames or as given names. Therefore, to those familiar with Japanese names, which name is the surname and which is the given name is usually apparent, no matter which order the names are presented in. This thus makes it unlikely that the two names will be confused. For example, when writing in English while using the family name given name naming order. However, due to the variety of pronunciations and differences in languages, some common surnames and given names may coincide when romanized, e.g., shoji and shoji. Japanese names have distinct differences from Chinese names through the selection of characters in a name and pronunciation. A Japanese person can distinguish a Japanese name from a Chinese name by looking at it. Akito Mozawa, author of Japan's Hidden Bilinguals, The Languages of War Orphans and the Families After Repatriation from China, said that this was equivalent to how Europeans can easily tell that the name Smith is English and Schmidt is German, or Victor is English or French and Vittorio is Italian. Characters. Japanese names are usually written in kanji, although some names use hiragana or even katakana, or a mixture of kanji and kana. While most traditional names use kanyomi kanji readings, a large number of given names and surnames use onyomi kanji readings as well. Many others use readings which are only used in names, such as the female name Nozomi. The majority of surnames comprise 1, 2 or 3 kanji characters. There are also a small number of 4 or 5 kanji surnames, such as Teshigawara and Kutaragi, Kadanokoji, but these are extremely rare. The sound no, indicating possession and corresponding to the character, is often included in names but not written as a separate character, as in the common name top, above, top of the well, or historical figures such as Senno Rikyu. Most personal names use 1, 2, or 3 kanji. 4-syllable given names are common, especially in eldest sons, is mentioned above. Female given names often end in the syllable ko, written with the kanji meaning child, or mi, written with the kanji meaning beautiful. The usage of ko has changed significantly over the years. Prior to the Meiji Restoration, it was reserved for members of the imperial family. Following the Restoration, it became popular and was overwhelmingly common in the Taisho and early Showa era. The suffix ko increased in popularity after the mid-20th century, around the year 2006, due to the citizenry mimicking naming habits of popular entertainers. The suffix ko was declining in popularity. At the same time, names of Western origin, written in kana, were becoming increasingly popular for naming of girls. By 2004 there was a trend of using hiragana instead of kanji in naming girls. Molly Hakes, author of the Everything Conversational Japanese book, basic instruction for speaking this fascinating language in any setting, said that this may have to do with using hiragana out of cultural pride, since hiragana is Japan's indigenous writing form, or out of not assigning a meaning to a girl's name so that others do not have a particular expectation of her. Names ending with ko dropped significantly in popularity in the mid-1980s, but are still given, though much less than in the past. Male names occasionally end with the syllable ko, but very rarely using the kanji. Common male name endings are shi and no. Names ending with shi are often adjectives, e.g., a sushi, which might mean, for example, faithful. Quote, "In the past, names written with katakana were common for women, but this trend seems to have lost favor. Hiragana names for women are not unusual. Kana names for boys, particularly those written in hiragana, have historically been very rare. This may be in part because the hiragana script is seen as feminine in medieval Japan. Women generally were not taught kanji and wrote exclusively in hiragana. Names cannot begin with the syllable n. This is in common with other proper Japanese words, though colloquial words may begin with as in. Some names end in n. The male names Ken, Shin, and Jin are examples. The syllable n should not be confused with the consonant n, which names can begin with, for example, the female name Naoko, the male Naoya. One large category of family names can be categorized as two names. The kanji, meaning wisteria, has the onyomi too. Many Japanese people have surnames that include this kanji as the second character. This is because the Fujiwara clan gave the samurai surnames ending with the first character of the name, to denote the status in an era when commoners were not allowed surnames. Examples include Ato, Ando, Ito, Udo, Eto, Endo, Goto's, Jito, Kato, Kito, Kudo, Kondo, Sato, Shindo, Sudo, Naito, Bito, and Muto. As already noted, some of the most common family names are in this list. Japanese family names usually include characters referring to places and geographic features. Difficulty of reading names. A name written in kanji may have more than one common pronunciation, only one of which is correct for a given individual. For example, the surname written in kanji as may be read either Tokiri or Shoji. Conversely, any one name may have several possible written forms, and again, only one will be correct for a given individual. The character, when used as a male given name, may be used as the written form for Hajime, Hitoshi, Ichi, Kazu, and many others. The name Hajime may be written with any of the following, or this many-to-many correspondence between names and the ways they are written is much more common with male given names than with surnames of female given names, but can be observed in all these categories. The permutations of potential characters and sounds can become enormous, as some very overloaded sounds may be produced by over 500 distinct kanji, and some kanji characters can stand for several dozen sounds. This can and does make the collation, pronunciation, and romanization of a Japanese name a very difficult problem. For this reason, business cards often include the pronunciation of the name as hiragana, and forms and documents often include spaces to write the reading of the name in kana. A few Japanese names, particularly family names, include archaic versions of characters. For example, the very common character Shima Island may be written as or instead of the usual. Some names also feature very uncommon kanji, or even kanji which no longer exist in modern Japanese. Japanese people who have such names are likely to compromise by substituting similar or simplified characters. This may be difficult for input of kanji in computers, as many kanji databases on computers only include common and regularly used kanji, and many archaic and mostly unused characters are not included. An odd problem occurs when an elderly person forgets how to write the name in old kanji that is no longer used. An example of such a name is Sato. There are two common kanji for sai here. The two sai characters have different meanings. Means together or parallel, but means to purify. These names can also exist written in archaic forms, as and respectively. Family names are sometimes written with idiosyncratic characters, called ataji, that relate indirectly to the name as spoken. For example, would normally be read as Shigatsu Sutachi, but as a family name it is read Watanuki, because April 1st is the traditional date to switch from winter to summer clothes. In the same way would normally be read as Kotoria Sobiya Shochoyu, but is read Takanashi, because little birds play where there are no hawks. Most Japanese people and agencies have adopted customs to deal with these issues. Address books, for instance, often contain hiragana ruby characters to clarify the pronunciation of the name. Japanese nationals are also required to give a romanized name for their passport. The recent use of Japanese media using katakana when referring to Japanese celebrities who have gained international fame has started a fad among young socialites who attempt to invoke a cosmopolitan flair using katakana names as a badge of honor. All of these complications are also found in Japanese place names. Not all names are complicated. Some common names are summarized by the phrase Tanakamura, the three kanji, and, together in any pair, form a simple, reasonably common surname: Tanaka, Nakamura, Murata, Nakata, Muranaka, Tamura. Despite these difficulties, there are enough patterns and recurring names that most native Japanese will be able to read virtually all family names they encounter and the majority of personal names. Some common interesting names with phonetic puns built in include Michio Kakus, which could mean draw a path or lead the way, and Suto Muhata, which can mean work for the flag. The kanji to write them obscure these meanings. Regulations: kanji names in Japan are governed by the Japanese Ministry of Justice's rules on kanji use in names. As of January 2015, only the 843 name kanji and 2,136 commonly used characters are permitted for use in personal names. This is intended to ensure that names can be readily written and read by those literate in Japanese. Rules also govern names considered to be inappropriate. For example, in 1993, two parents who tried to name their child Akuma were prohibited from doing so after a massive public outcry. Though there are regulations on the naming of children, many archaic characters can still be found in adults' names, particularly those born prior to the Second World War, because the legal restrictions on use of such kanji cause inconvenience for those with such names and promote a proliferation of identical names. Many recent changes have been made to increase rather than to reduce the number of kanji allowed for use in names. The Sapporo High Court held that it was unlawful for the government to deny registration of a child's name because it contained a kanji character that was relatively common but not included in the official list of name characters compiled by the Ministry of Justice. Subsequently, the Japanese government promulgated plans to increase the number of kanji permitted in names. The use of a space in given names is not allowed in official documents because technically a space is not an allowed character. However, spaces are sometimes used on business cards and in correspondence. Customs. In ancient times, people in Japan were considered the property of the emperor, and the surname reflected the role in the government they served. An example is Otomo. Names would also be given in the recognition of a great achievement and contribution. Until the Meiji Restoration, Japanese common people had no surnames, and when necessary, used a substitute such as the name of the birthplace. For example, Hishiro, born in Asahimura in the province of Musashi, would say Ichiro from Asahimura of Musashi. Merchants were named after the stores or brands, and farmers were named after the fathers. After the Meiji Restoration, the government ordered all commoners to assume surnames in addition to their given names. As part of modernization and westernization, this was specified in the Family Register Law of 1898. Many people adopted historical names. Others simply made names up, chose names through divination, or had a Shinto or Buddhist priest choose a surname for them. This explains, in part, the large number of surnames in Japan, as well as the great diversity of spelling and pronunciation, and makes tracing ancestry past a certain point extremely difficult in Japan. During the period when typical parents had several children, it was a common practice to name sons by numbers suffixed with ro. The first son would be known as Ichiro, the second as Jiro, and so on. Girls were often named with ko at the end of the given name. This should not be confused with the less common male suffix iko. Both practices have become less common, although many children still have names along these lines. While some people now may believe this, Lafcadio Hearn, in Shadowings, makes it clear that at least in his time, the ending ko was not any part of the name, but an honorific suffix like san. Particularly, even though the symbol was child, it meant lady, was used only to upper-class females, and would have been ridiculous applied to middle-class or lower-class women. Pretty much the same names were used by all classes, but Hanako was upper class, while lesser women would be Ohana-san, with honorific prefix as well as suffix. Speaking to and of others, the way in which a name is used in conversation depends on the circumstances and the speaker's relationships with the listener and the bearer of the name. Typically, the family name is used, with given names largely restricted to informal situations and cases where the speaker is older than, superior to, or very familiar with the named individual. When addressing someone or referring to a member of one's out-group, a title such as san is typically added. Japanese people often avoid referring to the seniors or superiors by name at all, using just a title. Within a family, this might be a kinship relation such as Oke-san. In a school it could be sensei, while a company president would be addressed as shacho. On the other hand, pronominals meaning you are used rather little in Japanese. Using such words sometimes sounds disrespectful, and people will commonly address each other by name, title and honorific even in face-to-face conversations. Calling someone's name without any title or honorific is called yobasute, and may be considered rude even in the most informal and friendly occasions. This faux pas, however, is readily excused for foreigners. Nicknames corresponding to any given name. There are one or more hypocoristics, affectionate nicknames. These are formed by adding the suffix chan to a stem. There are two types of stem. One consists of the full given name. Examples of this type are Taro-chan from Taro, Kimiko-chan from Kimiko, and Yasunari-chan from Yasunari. The other type of stem is a modified stem derived from the full given name. Examples of such names are Taro-chan from Taro, Ki-chan from Kimiko, and Ya-chan from Yasunari. Hypocoristics with modified stems are more intimate than those based on the full given name. Hypocoristics with modified stems are derived by adding chan to a stem consisting of an integral number, usually 1 but occasionally 2, of feet, where a foot consists of 2 moras. A mora is the unit of which a light syllable contains one and a heavy syllable two. For example, the stems that may be derived from taro are taro, consisting of two light syllables, and taa, consisting of a single syllable with a long vowel, resulting in taro-chan and ta-chan. The stems that may be derived from hanako are hana, with two light syllables, han, with one syllable closed by a consonant, and ha, with one syllable with a long vowel, resulting in hanachan, hanshan, and hashan. The segmental content is usually a left substring of that of the given name. However, in some cases it is obtained by other means, including the use of another reading of the kanji used to write the name. For example, a girl named Megumi may be called katakana just kei, because the character used to write the Megumi can also be read kei. The common Japanese practice of forming abbreviations by concatenating the first array of two words is sometimes applied to names. For example, Tiku Yukamura, a famous Japanese actor and singer, becomes Kimotaku. This is sometimes applied even to non-Japanese celebrities. Brad Pitt, whose full name in Japanese is Burado Pitto, is commonly known as Burapi, and Jimi Hendrix is abbreviated as Jimian. Some Japanese celebrities have also taken names combining kanji and katakana, such as Terry Ito. Another slightly less common method is doubling one or two syllables of the person's name, such as the use of Mama Mami for Mamiko Noto. Names from other ethnic groups in Japan. Many ethnic minorities, mostly Korean and Chinese, living in Japan adopt Japanese names. The roots of this custom go back to the colonial-era policy of Soshikaime, which permitted many Koreans to change their names to Japanese names. Nowadays, ethnic minorities, mostly Korean, who immigrated to Japan after the World War II, take on Japanese names, sometimes called past names, to ease communication and, more importantly, to avoid discrimination. A few of them still keep their native names. Sometimes, however, these ethnic Chinese and Koreans in Japan who choose to renounce permanent residence status to apply for Japanese citizenship have to change the characters in the names, because not all characters are legally recognized in Japan for naming purposes. Japanese citizenship used to require adoption of a Japanese name. In recent decades, the government has allowed individuals to simply adopt katakana versions of the native names when applying for citizenship, as is already done when referring to non-East Asian foreigners. National Diet member Tsurunen Marute, originally Marty Turunen, who is Finnish, is a famous example. Others transliterate the names into phonetically similar kanji compounds, such as activist Arudo Debatu, an American previously known as David Aldwinkle, although these renderings are artificial and would not exist in Japan otherwise. Still others have abandoned the native names entirely in favor of traditional Japanese names, such as Lafcadio Hearn, who used the name Koizumi Yakumo. At the time, to gain Japanese citizenship, it was necessary to be adopted by a Japanese family and take the name. Individuals born overseas with Western given names and Japanese surnames are usually given a katakana name in Western order when referred to in Japanese. Eric Shinseki, for instance, is referred to as. However, sometimes Japanese parents decide to use Japanese order when mentioning the child's name in Japanese. Also, Japanese parents tend to give their children a name in kanji, hiragana or katakana, particularly if it is a Japanese name. Even individuals born in Japan with a Japanese name might be referred to using katakana katakana if they've established residency or a career overseas. Yoko Ono, for example, was born in Japan with the name and spent the first 20 years of her life there. However, having lived outside the country for more than 50 years, and basing her career in the United States, Ono is often referred to in the press as preserving the Japanese order of her name, but rendering it in katakana. There is a restriction on the use of the V character in a name unless at least one of the parents is of foreign origin. The closest corresponding katakana is, which can be romanized as V or B. This affects issuing of Japanese passports or other documentation where a romanization of the name is given. The letter V is replaced with B. This affects names such as Kevin, which would be written as Keben. Japan's Christians traditionally have Christian names in addition to the native Japanese names. These Christian names are written using katakana, and are adapted to Japanese phonology from their original forms rather than being borrowed from any particular language like English. Peter, for example, is Petoro, John is Johann, James is Jacobu, Martin is Maruchino, Dominic is Domenico, and so on. For most purposes in real life, the Christian names aren't used. For example, Taro Ieso has a Christian name, Francisco, which is not nearly as well known.